In this video, I'll be giving you a step-by-step overview of the Oxbridge application, how it works, and some top tips that you should consider on your application journey. My name is Erin, this is The Student Journey, a channel dedicated to supporting you on your own student and application journey, as well as sharing some insights from my own. This video is very much specific to the undergraduate application for Oxford and Cambridge, but not including foundation years. So if you're interested in foundation years, do let me know and comment below, and I'll share any information that I have on that to support you. Where relevant, I'll link to any videos that have already been uploaded or that I create and upload in the future. So do look out for pop-ups in or around the screen that will direct you to videos that kind of elaborate on some of the key points in the application process. So let's get started. The first step in the application process, assuming you have chosen both your course and university, is to essentially submit an application by October 15th. You do this via UCAS, and as part of your application you'll submit some personal details, information such as your predicted grades and the grades you have achieved already, as well as your personal statement. Now, your personal statement is a huge task, and as I said, I'll definitely link to helpful videos to support you with that, but essentially it is a statement in which you put forward why you are suited to this particular course, and that is sent to all the universities you apply to, so it's not a kind of letter specific to a particular university. You don't need to kind of compliment them or talk loads about them. It's about you and your suitability to your chosen course. So if you're applying for Cambridge, you also complete the SAQ, and that is a supplementary application questionnaire. That asks for additional questions and additional information specific to kind of you and your experience. So that could include what modules you're taking in your A-levels or similar qualifications. It could also include information such as whether you've experienced any kind of educational disruption that you maybe haven't had space to write about in your UCAS application. And additionally, they offer the chance for an additional personal statement. So this is really important, particularly for Cambridge, where there are some quite niche courses on offer, things like human, social and political sciences or natural sciences. You may be applying for them at Cambridge, but at other universities it could be that you're applying for straight sociology or biology on its own. So this is a great opportunity to kind of speak to that course specifically, to explain why it is that you want to do that course at Cambridge. Don't put too much pressure on yourself to complete this. It's completely understood by admissions tutors that students applying for these very niche courses are applying for different courses elsewhere, but it is a really good opportunity to talk about why that course specifically. Similarly, if you are applying for one course everywhere, so that could be something like philosophy or engineering, this is just a nice chance to say anything extra about the Cambridge course if you want to. There's no harm in writing more if you want to write more, but also you won't be disadvantaged if you don't complete that. So I applied for my undergraduate course at the University of Cambridge. I studied what was called Education and English at the time. At other universities I was applying for slightly different courses, either Education and Psychology or Education and Childhood Studies, and as part of my SAQ I didn't write an additional personal statement because I felt like I had covered everything I wanted to on my personal statement. So my top tip for applying, both using the UCAS form and the SAQ, is just to share as much information as you'd like to and to give as much context as you feel comfortable to. This can include any educational disruption, whether that's, you know, having a high teacher turnover, so your teachers keep changing every term, or you have been sick for a number of weeks and missed quite a lot of school. Do feel free to share that. That just really helps the admissions tutors understand where it is you're coming from and the conditions in which you have achieved the work you have so far. Don't feel like this all has to go onto your personal statement. Again, there's the SAQ opportunity if you are applying for Cambridge. There is your teacher reference. Do talk to your teacher about what it is you want the university to know, and perhaps what it is you weren't able to fit on your personal statement if there's no longer room there. And in much more severe circumstances, Cambridge and perhaps Oxford, I'm not too sure, offer what is called an extenuating circumstances form, and that is where you have experienced severe disruption. That is a form that you can fill out, and it's usually supported by either a teacher, a social worker or medical professional. The second part of the application process is preparing to sit any admissions tests you might have. Now, it's really important to do your research here because these vary from course to course and university to university. It's the case that most admissions tests are sat in school around the same date, so it's usually early November time, and it would be your teacher who registers you for this. However, it does vary. So things like the LNAT for law are tests that you would do in your own time, usually over summer, and you do this in a test centre, a bit like somewhere you might sit a theory test for driving. Most other tests, on the other hand, will be done in school because your school will be a registered test centre as long as you have sat, say, A-levels or GCSEs in that space. The most important thing about this is to do your research. What each kind of different admissions assessment is testing or trying to get from you really varies from subject to subject. For tests such as the BMAT and perhaps more of the science tests, what they're often doing is trying to get you to kind of consider the knowledge you already have, whether that's from your science GCSE or your maths GCSE or maybe even A-level content, and apply that to unfamiliar situations. So for those tests, it's really important that you kind of revise and get that overview of your subject knowledge. For more humanities-based tests, on the other hand, such as the ELAT for English or the HAT or HAA for history, or even the LNAT for law, it's actually the case that you are responding and using a kind of different skill set to look at new situations. So it doesn't matter what you learnt from English before or what you learnt from history. Contextual knowledge is actually often discouraged in these tests. Instead, it is about responding to the information you have and using kind of critical thinking, essay writing skills and things like that to answer those questions. My top tip for preparing for admissions tests is really just to do some practice papers. If you're applying to Oxford or Cambridge, you usually have the ability to do these tests and to do them quite well. The biggest challenge is the time in which you're given to do them. So many people can do the BMAT, many people can do the TSA. It's just much harder to do them in the kind of timed conditions you're given. So get used to that, get comfortable with that, and as said, practice those key skill sets or revise that key knowledge for those other tests as well. The third step, and this is only specific to some students, is that you might be asked to submit some work. So for some colleges and some specific subjects, you're asked to send examples of any work that you've completed in year 12 or year 13, and this tends to be humanities subjects or subjects in which you're writing essays. Each college will stipulate what it is they're looking for, but it's usually the case that if you're applying for history, they'd like a history essay. If you're applying for English, they'd like an English essay. But it may be the case that for other newer subjects, they're just looking for any piece of academic writing. This work doesn't need to be written up specifically for your application. It needs to be something that you've submitted as part of your A-level or equivalent course, and it usually needs to have feedback and comments from your teachers. There's no real hard and fast rule. Some people like to send coursework, some people like to send things in timed conditions, but it's up to your teacher to really frame what that piece of work is about and the conditions in which you sat it. It's not the case that one is better than the other, but do have a think and have a discussion with your teacher about what it is you'd like to send, what it is you'd like to kind of put forward to showcase your ability. And my top tip for those of you who are submitting a piece of work is essentially to keep a copy of this. If you are invited to an interview, it may be the case that this work is used to kind of frame and start a discussion, even if it's not as relevant to your subject as you might think. And when an interviewer does use this piece of written work, they're usually being quite nice to you. They're starting with something you're familiar with and something that you have put forward. So make sure you keep that piece of work, you read it, dissect it before an interview, and essentially be prepared to be challenged on it. So the next step, if your application has gone really well, is that you might be invited to interview. Now this is often perceived as a kind of big, scary Oxbridge specific thing, and it does make people nervous. That's completely understandable. But a few kind of myths to debunk are the fact that it's not just a question and answer session. It's instead a discussion between yourself and two academics for about maybe 20 minutes, either about your subject or more generally. Whether the interview takes place in person or online, the key focus is for the interviewers to get an understanding of how you learn, how you think, and how you approach new and challenging situations. It is not the case that people throw a rugby ball or do something kind of weird and wacky. It's more about working through a big idea or a mathematical problem and just kind of getting a feel for how you learn and how you work. You're usually interviewed at one or more colleges, particularly those of you who applied to Oxford. So at Oxford, it is normal practice and actually completely expected that you are interviewed by multiple colleges. And this is just a moderation process. It is to check that each interviewer is giving very similar scores to the same candidates or similar ability candidates, just to really moderate that process and check that things are kind of valid and reliable. I do have a video on preparing for Oxbridge interviews, but my top tip would just be to practice with anyone anywhere. It's not about having these really well rehearsed formulaic answers. It's about being comfortable talking out loud and thinking out loud about your opinions on kind of different academic issues within your field. So just get used to having those conversations. For a lot of people, it's completely new. I definitely didn't talk about schoolwork because it wasn't very cool to do so. So I did feel quite nervous, but I'm very fortunate in that I had a number of teachers who were kind of willing to practice with me and get me comfortable talking about my subject out loud. Finally, after all of that, you will get a response from either Oxford or Cambridge. And I think a lot of people like to assume it's accept or reject, but there are a few nuances within that. So first and foremost, there is just being rejected, which is unfortunate, but not the end of the world. If you've applied to Oxford or Cambridge, you're probably a very highly able student and have probably applied to other incredible universities. So please don't feel down if you have been rejected. This is actually the boat that most people are in, and it's not as life-defining as you think it is. It's just a really big moment at this point in your life now. Another thing that could happen is you may be rejected but told that you are eligible for adjustment. Now, adjustment is specific to Cambridge, and what it means is that if you meet a certain set of criteria and come results day, you have exceeded what would be the standard Cambridge offer, and Cambridge also have spaces for those courses, they may reconsider your application. If you are in that position, that will all be fully explained, but it's essentially an access initiative that allows the university to reconsider people who are actually really talented candidates. If you are eligible for adjustment, that will all be explained to you when the time comes, but I would say don't get too caught up in it because it really depends on if those spaces are available come results day. And then there are two ways in which you can be accepted. So you can just be accepted onto the course and college that you applied to, which is fantastic and really great news for you, or you can be what I'm going to call accepted but. So you have been accepted but the conditions have slightly changed. That could be that you've been accepted but to a different college. This is a system that we call being pooled. What that means is essentially the college you applied to or were interviewed at have said this is a really strong candidate, they are deserving of a place, but we don't have the room for you. And they have put that application forward for other colleges to consider who maybe weren't happy with the applicants they got through and they have a number of spaces. So you still get in, you still get to go to the university, but you're just at a different college than you expected. Another type of accepted but, which is quite rare, is that you've been put onto a slightly different course. Now this is really, really rare, but it's more likely to happen where you have applied for joint honours. So if at the University of Oxford you have applied for English and History, or at the University of Cambridge you have applied for History and Politics, it may be the case that they've said, you know, you're a strong applicant, you're really, really good, we definitely think you could, you know, I guess thrive and do well in a space like this university. However, you are just so much stronger in history and we'd like to give you an offer for history only. That's not really common practice and it's very rare that students are in that situation, but it's something to think about because it does happen every now and then. There's no specific top tip when it comes to getting a response from the university you have applied to, but what I would say is it's just not as deep as you think it is. Wherever you go, you will be fantastic. Some people don't get in, you know, some people get an interview but still get rejected. Some people get an offer but miss that offer, and that's okay. Everyone will do fantastically wherever you go, and if you're the type of student who is ambitious and motivated, the university doesn't matter. It's kind of the values and the kind of spirit that you have that will make the difference. The final thing left to do is respond to any university offers that you have on UCAS. So what you do on UCAS is you select a firm offer and an insurance offer. Your firm offer is the university that you want to go to the most. If you get the grades to go to that university, you have said on results day, I'm definitely going to you. And then your insurance is almost like your backup university. If you don't get the grades to go to your firm, you'll be put forward to your insurance as long as you get the grades that they're asking for. For that reason, it's really important that you ensure that the university you select for your insurance is asking for lower grades than the university that you put as your firm. Just because if you don't get the grades for either, you're automatically rejected from both. And if your firm is higher than your insurance, then there's just no way you're going to go there. I hope this has been helpful for those of you who want an overview of what that application process looks like. If you are applying, I do really wish you the best of luck. Feel free to check out my other videos, many of which support students applying to Oxford specifically. In the meantime, thank you, best of luck, and see you soon.